a lot of the time it comes down to how hostile the parents are and whether there's family violence involved, whether the child's been exposed to family violence, what level of conflict have the children seen or been exposed to. Some parents are very good at not, that's their problem, their issue. They're dealing with the separation. The kids don't need to be involved, and they shouldn't be involved no matter what the age. Children should not be involved in adults' problems at all. That's something that I'm really feel strong about.
Yeah.
However, because, the impact on the kids, just, kids are kids. They shouldn't have to grow up before their time. Like, keep them as innocent as possible. Uncertainty, where are they going to be? Where are they going to live with mum? Are they going to live with dad? Are they going to, be separated from their siblings? Like, kids need consistency. And if they don't have that because their parents are just, I'll just say it, thinking about themselves and their own issues, then it's certainly going to impact the children.
So, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, it's definitely been a long sort of back and forth.
Yeah.
But in a good way. I mean, you're, a busy professional lawyer lady, boss lady, and also, you have a family and you're all the way living in the country. So
yes,
thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. Thanks very much for
having me.
But yeah, so if people who are listening don't know, we have lovely Ashlyn here from Haven Legal Co. And I want her to kind of say the spiel about, who she is, like why she became a lawyer, and like we have so many interesting things to talk about today. So yeah.
All right, no problems. Well, firstly, to answer your question, certainly being a lawyer wasn't something that I thought I'd grow up being. I always just wanted to be a hairdresser when I was growing up. But no, it probably wasn't. I grew up in a small country town, Cobram, which is on the border of Victoria and New South Wales. So wasn't until high school and probably about year 11, maybe even year 12, that I thought I like legal studies as a subject. So maybe
that's so rare. That's so random.
I know. Maybe just try doing law, and then sort of just one thing. Yeah, sort of just ended up. So I've got a double degree in law and economics, so which I don't think I've used the economics side of things too much. But
you can say I understand money.
Yeah,
somewhere.
I understand money in some way, or supply demand, something like that. So that's sort of how I got into law, and I started off. I mean, after doing my traineeship, it used to be called articles, traineeship, which is sort of like your apprenticeship, I guess, but after you've finished your law degree. So it took me 5 years to do my law degree, and then did a 2-year traineeship, and then I went into, and then you're a qualified lawyer. So I was, as they call it, a generalist lawyer. Right. So I was doing every single area of law. And then I sort of just got a liking to family law, and I've just stuck with it.
Yeah. So like, how was it with being in the country and wanting to do that? Is that something common, or is that because usually maybe I'm just generalizing, and maybe people listening would be like, you generalizer, but it's a bit more simple life. Like, you don't really want too much of, I feel like being a lawyer is something more city life sort of thing, or am I just generalizing?
No, I think in a way, I mean, when you're at uni, that's certainly something that you're sort of taught to strive for, those clerkships at, the big four firms. Being a commercial or a corporate lawyer is something that, because you hear all the stories, they get paid the big bucks, and, and it's, if you like the city lifestyle, then perfect. But, sometimes it's not for everyone. And certainly for me, I think growing up in the country is where I wanted to be. Whereas where I wanted to eventually end up, which, I mean, I did live in Melbourne whilst I was studying, but I ended up going back and doing my traineeship in Shepparton.
Oh, yeah.
And also then going to Echuca and working there for nearly 3 years, and then I came to Ballarat, and that was about 5 years ago.
Right.
So, yeah, I've always sort of stayed that country, but just the country towns have gotten a little bit bigger along the time. So
Cool.
I think I don't think that's generalising at all, but you probably do notice that more people who have grown up in the country tend to end back in the country as opposed to the other way around. People who grew up in the city don't generally tend, they might try the country,
like
last
escape.
a couple of years and then think, no, I'm just going to go, I love the city.
Yeah, right. So like what got you into, because if you're more of a general lawyer, right? So you kind of covered everything. In a way that kind of gave you a glimpse into like different things, right? Which is the best position to be in, really.
Oh, 100%. And I'll always say that I've always been thankful for sort of the opportunities that I've had whilst sort of growing and developing as a lawyer, because I have had that opportunity to, draft someone's will and do their estate planning from start to go, and also, property law, like what it takes when it's buying and selling houses and, purchase and sales of businesses, and I've even dabbled in a little bit of criminal law, and so it's all, I think sometimes, and I think that makes you a lot more well-rounded as a family lawyer, because you then understand the process. Okay, well you've separated, so now you need to update your will, or as part of probably your property settlement in, with your family law matter, someone's going to be buying each other out, or you're going to have to sell. So here's the process, things like that. So I think I certainly think it benefited me, in the long run.
Yeah.
I'd met some family lawyers that did just the family law work, and then once that was done, wouldn't know how to deal with it. I mean, this was a while ago. I mean, now most of us know what's going on, but sometimes you just did family law, and that's exactly what you did. You couldn't give any, you couldn't give any advice as to what the conveyancing process would be or anything like that. So yeah, I think it certainly helped me in terms of my practice.
No, that's awesome. So with Haven Legal Co., what drew you to that? Because when I was looking at and looking around, I guess the Brunswick sort of Coburg community, I saw you guys and I was like, whoa, this is. I mean, it's very aesthetically pleasing website, and having you guys there. But I also love that when I was looking for at a lot of law firms, it was very gray, black and white. Man, very intimidating.
Yes.
Maybe that's the look people want as a lawyer. You want an intimidating lawyer, I don't know. But when I saw you guys, it was very friendly, it was very inviting. It was a vibe where it was not just super, and I'm not saying you guys are not super serious, but it was just a much more inviting vibe that you gave off as to something that was quite intimidating, but a bit scary, where I was like, I don't think I'm going to email these people.
Yes. I get that. And I mean, save for there's a law student who's male. We're all female lawyers and conveyancers and receptionists, but they're certainly not against it.
Oh yeah.
In employing males or anything like that. But I actually, Adele, who's one of the partners there, she actually used to practice in Cobram, and so I got to know her because I was I'm from Cobram, and sort of she was this new lawyer in town, and we just sort of, I don't know, started talking, and even throughout throughout my career, even as I've had questions, sometimes I'd call Adele and say, what's up with this, or can you help me out with this, or something like that. So she's always been, I suppose, a bit of a mentor there. And then, this role's come up, and she reached out and said, do you want to come work for us? And here I am.
Yeah.
So it was sort of, I wasn't really on the lookout for anything new or anything like that. But then, in terms of what Adele and also Fiona, her business partner, were offering, is that flexibility, that sort of, openness to more of a family life, and being able to, balance that with work. And, I think we're probably more like people sort of person, and very driven by, the clientele and, and forming those connections, as opposed to just taking instructions, going away, drafting what they want drafted, and then giving it back to them and never talking to them ever again. Like that's certainly not what we're about. So I think that, you know, and you want to have that warmth, particularly when you're, you know, when you've got clients who are going through one of the most, you know, a separation is one of the hardest things someone's going to have to deal with, and they have to tell you a lot about their personal life. They want to know that they can speak to someone who is warm and who they feel like they can trust and everything like that. So I think that's certainly, you know, it's certainly a good trait to have.
Yeah, absolutely. So, oh gosh. So what, how do you view, you know, family law at the moment, now that you're more experienced and you're advanced in your career? How do you sort of look at it from the outside in, right? Because you're in, but like, how do you see it from the outside, like as a whole? Do you feel,
Yeah, I suppose for that, I mean, I would have to, I suppose, nearly compare my personal life to my work life.
Yeah.
Like what I was telling you,
yes.
my partner, he's divorced and has 3 children, and they live with us 50% of the time.
Yeah.
And that just in itself, you know, becoming their stepmother and dealing with, you know, children's arrangements and all that sort of stuff actually in your real life compared to what you deal with in your job has offered me a lot of insight actually into what actually takes place in the family law process. Mind you, majority of the people go and see a lawyer because they can't sort things out for themselves,
right.
Opposed. So at work, there's more of that, you know, the parties aren't necessarily overly amicable.
Yep.
They can't have a discussion with one another, so they have to do it through lawyers. But then on the other hand, they may just come to us because they need something documented and because they can't do it themselves as it's not a legally binding document,
right.
we do it for them or give them that advice as to what processes they need to take. But I certainly, in terms of, you know, how perhaps the courts evolved or anything like that, we did have the 2 courts. So it used to be the Federal Circuit Court and the Family Court of Australia. They merged, which was supposed to sort of just increase just productivity and efficiency, getting matters through a bit quicker and sort of only having the real serious matters heard where appropriate and now, you know, in front of judges, and now we've got all these judicial registrars and it's sort of within the last sort of 12, 18 months, I'm trying to think when it came in. I think it might have been the middle of last year. I'll have to look that up. But so that's sort of been now a new processes to learn and you know, just getting your head around that, and also particularly with COVID, everything's still, you know, via telephone conference or web conference. Right. A lot of it's still online. There's no actual, well, there's still physical appearances, at court, but it's still not every single matter.
Right. And so does that affect and like the outcome of things, or like the length of the processes that happen, or?
I think it's been, I mean, certainly, and I think it's a lot of lawyers' view is that going online has streamlined everything. It has become a lot more efficient.
Okay. Yep.
Rather than sitting around at a courthouse waiting for your time to be called, or, you know, a lot of the negotiations are done prior to the court date.
Right.
So both, you know, I feel like, you know, you're more prepared going into a hearing,
right?
Because you've already negotiated perhaps quite, you know, thoroughly with the other side, as to what, you know, terms of settlement you're after, or what, you know, custody agreement that you're after. So yeah, I feel like it has improved the process, but I do feel sorry for young lawyers who haven't had that opportunity to go to court and watch barristers, watch lawyers and learn from them, because I remember doing that as a junior and it was fantastic.
So then what are the main reasons people come to your office for like the divorce? What are the main sort of,
so mainly, I mean, usually it's usually quite fresh. They've just separated. It's whether it's in regard to children arrangements, depends if one party's moved out of the house or if they're both under the same roof, what 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 can be dealt with regard to the children, what advice do they need with regard to the children, and also then how to deal with the property settlement. So,
right. Okay.
Just think, mum and dad, they've both, they've got a house together, they've got a mortgage, they might have a investment property, caravan, they both have motor vehicles, they both got bank accounts.
Right.
They might have a bit of debt other than the mortgage, say like a credit card debt, and also superannuation.
Right.
So they're sort of the things that you've got to take into account, and ask those questions, because not a lot of people sort of know that.
So you're saying that, so all the way down to your super and your debt is something that's involved in with the finances that go into.
So ultimately you're the entire property pool. So anything that's in joint names or in sole names, as it doesn't matter if, you might have bought it when you're 18 and now you're 65. If it still exists, it gets included in the property pool.
Right. So would you say the majority of the reasons people file for divorce or end up in your office or under your services is because of financial issues, or would you say it's like, or do they even tell you? I mean, the reasons why? Because I'm very new to this. That's why.
Sure.
Yeah.
So and just to clarify, so divorce and separation are two separate things. So people generally come because they've separated. They may well still be married, but they can still do their property settlement or deal with kids' arrangements whilst they're separated. The divorce is the formal process of not being married, and you have to be separated and for 1 year before you can apply for a divorce. So, which gets a little bit confusing sometimes when people say, they call up and say, I want to get a divorce. And you say, well, have you been separated for 12 months? And they say, no, it just happened. You say, oh, okay, well, you don't want a divorce just yet. We need to look at the other things first. We need to deal with the property settlement and also deal with children's arrangements.
Right.
So generally, to answer your question of what walks through the door more, I would say equally. However, we're a private firm, and it obviously can get quite costly, particularly with regard to children. And what is offered is mediation services, and what the court encourage and say is that has to take place prior to any court proceedings being issued, is that you have to attend mediation or counselling. So if clients can come to you and say, look, I want some advice. But ultimately, if it's going to end up in court, they still have to go to Relationships Australia, or they still have to go to Catholic Care or to a private mediation or counselling service first to try and sort it out, because the court, they don't want people going through court.
Right. And also you don't want to be heated, right? You don't want to be
that's
going
right.
through emotional.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. So where matters, so that's generally where, and we don't do legal aid, which is, something separate and a different sort of process when it comes to clients that are seeking or are eligible for legal aid. But we generally refer them off to a mediation service first, unless of course they've already done mediation, they're still not agreeing on anything, but they don't want to go to court, they still want to try and negotiate through lawyers, then obviously we assist them. But so that's the kids side of things. The property side of things is, you don't need to go to mediation. You can go to mediation if you want and try and sort it out and save yourself a little bit of money by not going through lawyers. But some people just want to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, right. So then do you see, because with people, I think most people's perspective on divorce is just, everyone just grows horns and just goes and charges at each other, right? Because now... But then, people say you married the person you divorced, right? So they had those traits. Do you feel like that is something that, everyone sort of possesses when they're going through a divorce is, my life is pretty much ending of what I thought it was going to be. And then now kind of coming into your offices and being given advice. Do you find that they take that fully, or do they still try and do their own sort of thing behind?
I think
your back?
Yeah, definitely. I think that depends how many people they've spoken to. If they've got friends or family that have been through the process before, they're usually highly, they're sometimes a bad influence on the client because, they sometimes don't help the situation. And yes, like we do generally, I mean, some are amicable. Some have said, we've sorted this out. This is how we're going to do our property split, or this is how we're going to do the kids' arrangement. Can you please draft this?
Right. Okay.
And get it filed with the court. So they're the simple ones. They're the procedural sort of get it done. You might review it and say, oh, she's getting too much, or he's getting too much, or something or other. But generally they're quite straightforward. But yes, the ones that where the people cannot, like the parents cannot get along, whether they had those traits at the start, I mean, well, it depends how long they were married for. Yeah. The stress, their life stresses that happen throughout a relationship. I mean, perhaps you met when you were, I'll use the same analogy. You met when you're 18, no children, no financial stresses, and then and then things happen. You have children and, life happens and stresses happen. So, and it does, it changes people. It changes people. So, whether those red flags were there at the start, for some, yes. Yeah. For some, I mean, I've got a lot of repeat offender clients.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
In what way? What do you mean?
Oh, well, they separate from one, they do a property settlement, and then they get with the next one, and then they do a property settlement. Like, and it's very similar traits.
Wow. So
when it comes, So I mean, in those circumstances, yes, you should see the red flags from the start. But anyway, I'm just their lawyer. I'm not there to give them any life advice.
Yeah.
And I think that, life can, stresses along the way, financial stresses in particular.
Yeah, right.
Can certainly alter a relationship. And obviously if one party's unfaithful, can impact, the relationship on the children.
And do you find that it makes it, because, people say, oh, well, if he's cheated, it makes everything much easier because infidelity is, I'll take him for everything he's got, you know? Yeah. It's a famous line.
Yeah. And I think we watch too many television shows and too many movies for that to actually be a reality. So here in Australia, we have a no-fault jurisdiction.
Okay.
So ultimately, it doesn't matter who ended the relationship, why, whether it was through infidelity or whether they just got sick of each other or, something like that. I mean, obviously family violence is something that gets taken into consideration in a separate jurisdiction through the Family Violence Act. However, when it comes to when you separate, you won't get an adjustment if, like, I should get everything because my husband cheated on me.
Right.
It doesn't work like that.
Because money is not emotional, right?
No, it's about crunching. Like, you can play on someone's credibility.
Right.
If you know how the relationship ended, and sometimes it paves the way for how, the matter proceeds, because you might, if one person really hates the other because of something they've done, you might not be able to settle as easily. It might not be an easy settlement the way that you think it should be, because one person's going to be perhaps quite unreasonable,
right? Because
of, feelings and emotions and things like that. But on paper, no, it's a no-fault jurisdiction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is, in a way, I mean, I feel like that's way better than going like the American way.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? Because that just ends up being really ugly.
Yeah. Citing
irreconcilable differences
or something like that. That's what you see when all the supermodels and
the top
athletes get separate. You think it's all these, for these reasons. You think, really?
Yeah, exactly. And then have you seen a difference with the amount of people after COVID or during COVID? Because people are saying that, divorce rates were through the roof, because now you're stuck with each other,
Yeah, and it's true.
Really?
Yeah,
okay.
It's true. I mean, you wouldn't meet a family lawyer that was out of a job during COVID.
Right.
Like it still stayed constant, even busier because people were stuck with one another, and there was no leaving the house and going and seeing someone, or even meeting up to have a chat or something like that. And there was obviously a bit of there was limited access to other services such as counselling, psychology, mental health. So we do find the court actually have established a special list called the COVID list.
Okay.
Where matters now that if you've been affected by COVID and your separation is a result of COVID, you can file proceedings and be listed in this special list that essentially deals with just matters that are as a result of COVID. So the court have actually opened up an entirely new list to account for people who have been affected or their separation is as a result of COVID.
Right, but then what's so special about this list?
You may well get in quicker.
Oh, okay.
You may well get before a judge or a registrar quicker.
Right.
Because there's not as many perhaps in this list as what there are in just the everyday list.
Right.
So they obviously saw a need and the demand to open up something like that because the work just continued.
Wow, that's I feel like I understand that, but also how do you find the balance between not being their counselor, right? Because they could just call you to just talk.
Yeah. You've got to have a bit of empathy, of course. I think if I'm talking personally for me, I've always save for one firm, I've always worked for a private law firm. So, I'm charging by the hour.
Yeah, right.
So, sometimes you need to have that conversation and say, I'm not being rude and there's a lot of support people out there that can help you, but do you really want to talk to me at, X amount per hour about your feelings? Let's just sort of get to the point.
Yeah.
But then, you meet other practitioners that, thrive off that and their clients love them because they can be both. But no, I've certainly, for me, I feel like I've sort of set those boundaries pretty quickly in the piece, and that there are people they can talk to, and talking to me are happy to talk to you.
Yeah.
But I'm going to have to charge you, which I don't think is fair on the client.
Yeah, right.
Because I'm not a counsellor. I'm here to give legal advice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's good to remind them as well. Just be like, hey, just letting you know, I know I seem a bit callous and a bit cold, but
I know. And if you meet me, I'm not like that at all. But usually I'm like, oh, happy to have a chat.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the job, it's like, no, I don't. I just don't want to waste their money.
Yeah.
Ultimately, when they can go and talk to someone else, cheaper or for free, and probably get better advice than what I could give.
Absolutely. So then with what you've seen, I'd love to talk about the impact that it has on the children, right? Because you also have a first-hand experience with that. And just because also just letting people know I came from a divorced household. So it sort of hits a bit closer to home, and maybe this is why I wanted to have you here so we can have these conversations.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
So then people also feel like they can relate to our sort of situations, even though they're very different, but it's still,
Yeah, definitely. And again, it a lot of the time it comes down to how hostile the parents are, and whether there's family violence involved, whether the child's been exposed to family violence, what level of conflict have the children seen or been exposed to. Some parents are very good at not, that's their problem, their issue. They're dealing with the separation. The kids don't need to be involved, and they shouldn't be involved no matter what the age. Children should not be involved in adults' problems at all. That's something that I'm really feel strong about.
Yeah.
However, because the impact on the kids, just kids are kids. They shouldn't have to grow up before their time. Like, keep them as innocent as possible. However, but unfortunately there are instances of, family violence occurring in the home, high levels of conflict, which obviously affect the children in terms of, uncertainty. Where are they going to be? Where are they going to live with mum? Are they going to live with dad? Are they going to, be separated from their siblings? Like kids need consistency. And if they don't have that because their parents are just, I'll just say it, thinking about themselves and their own issues, then it's certainly going to impact the children.
So then when do you think the communication should be told about what's happening, right? So you want to separate them from, like, ideal situation. They don't really know what's happening.
Yeah.
But then I've heard some people say, no, I kind of let them know a bit so then they're not shocked when it's like, oh, dad's not coming back ever.
Yeah. And that's something that if you're able to talk to your former partner about because at the end of the day, it's what's in the kid's best interest. Their interests are the first and foremost. So put your animosity to one another aside.
Yeah.
To sit down with the children. I mean, look, I think, probably again, this is all circumstantial and whether or not there is family violence in the home and things like that. But, you'd probably recommend that it happens sooner rather than later. And, kids' ages, they're really dependent. Right. I mean, sometimes, when they're young, they've got no idea what's going on, whereas when they're, maybe 15 or 16 and then they start to hear things that mum or dad have done can sort of cause a bit of a rift. And, so there's obviously no perfect time to separate when it comes to the kids. But, I mean, the parent's in control. Yeah. The parents are in control as to how they let it affect the children.
Yeah. Because then it ends up affecting the children way longer than the divorce.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you look at, the amount of children that go through proceedings now, like a lot of them are seeing psychologists or, are on mental health plans or, something, their school, they're struggling with school, they're learning or something like that because, home life probably isn't so great anymore and their focus is shift from perhaps their friends at school to, how's mum feeling or how's dad feeling or things like that, which shouldn't be a responsibility. Yeah, it shouldn't be a responsibility on a child.
No.
But, I mean, it happens. It happens. And, it's certainly the parents are the ones that have got to sort of pave that way and take their own emotion and everything out of it and say, all right, well, we're here for the kids and the kid, they come first. Let's not worry about what happened between the two of us. Let's just think about the kids so that they, can both have a meaningful relationship with both parents because both parents should want that.
Yeah.
I mean, they were in love once.
Yeah.
Like, you've got to remember that.
Yeah, right. And I think it's good to create those boundaries as adults, being like, well, if I really need to talk about what I'm going through, I can call Shelley.
Yes.
I can call Anne, right?
That's right.
We can go and have a couple of wines and really talk, and I'll really tell her everything of how I feel.
Absolutely.
And then sort of separate that so then your kids are not your BFF.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, you certainly need to keep that parent-child relationship as opposed to leaning on them and becoming their best friend and, becoming dependent ultimately on your child or on your parent when it's like, no, it's a power. There is a power imbalance.
Yeah, right.
Because you're the parent and they're the child. You shouldn't be at the same level. No. Particularly when it comes to discipline. It just blurs the line a little bit. And, like I said earlier, like let kids be kids. Like they shouldn't be exposed to these adult issues. Like they've got a whole lifetime of that to have to worry about adult issues. Yeah. Like let's not expose them to it.
Yeah, like don't like being grown up is overrated.
Yeah, that's right. Stay in school, kids.
Stay young, please, forever.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then how is it now that, you being a stepmom as well, right?
Yeah.
So in a way you've seen how that whole process has gone through with kids. How is your views now with that having, happening to you personally in your life? You know?
Yeah. So, I mean, my partner and his ex, or the mother of the children, they get along quite well.
Yeah.
You know, they probably bicker like every separated couple do,
of course,
but in the scheme of things, you know, and particularly what I see day in, day out at work, they have quite an amicable relationship. And I think that seeing that, and then also seeing, you know, the kids and my relationship with the children, in a way I would say has sort of influenced my work, and perhaps, you know, when a client comes to you and says, oh, you know, she dropped him off 15 minutes late, this is ridiculous. I want to, you know, have her breached with this and that. And you sort of think, well, actually, if that happened to me, I know I've been 15 minutes late to pick up and drop off. Like, you know, it shouldn't be that big of a deal. So I think in a way it has helped my work in terms of just seeing it in the real world.
Yeah.
Because I came from you know, my parents are still together. My grandparents are all still together.
Right.
My brother and sister, they're both, you know, married to their partners and have got children. You know, our whole family, no one's separated.
Yeah.
Everyone's still.
Touch wood, yeah.
Yeah, touch wood.
Yeah.
Like I never grew up with separated parents or divorced parents. You know, my friends' parents were together. You know, I wasn't really exposed to it.
Yeah.
And now sort of it's in, you know, I remember when I met Chris and had to tell my mum that, you know, he's still married, but he's separated, and it was, oh gosh, she nearly fell off her chair. You can't be with a married man. Yes, Mum, I can.
Yeah.
So, I think certainly that dynamic at home has helped, you know, me with, you know, just perspective when it comes to, you know, my role as being a family lawyer.
Yeah, right. And then, so going back to the children and how we're talking about that, how is it being a stepmom with children who are, I guess, a product of that environment? Is there any like advice you can give anyone coming to that situation, and what's your experience been? Right?
Yeah, I think, you know, children just, you know, they just want to be loved, really, and they want someone that, you know, that they feel safe around. You know, it's a funny one. It's a funny question you ask, because I've actually got a girlfriend that she's in a similar predicament to me, and she doesn't cook for the children. She doesn't do their washing. She says to her partner, they're your children, even though they live together, but, you know, they're your children. So you know, whereas me from the start, I've been, yep, school lunch, you know, you're involved in their life because, I mean, you want to be. And, you know, they don't have a mother figure when they're with their father, and likewise, they don't have a father figure when they're with their mother because their parents are separated. So if you can, you know, kids, you know, I think they need that. They need that. So, you know, and some people don't have the maternal instinct about them or anything, but you probably then wouldn't date someone who's got 3 children if you didn't. So, it's an interesting concept. But yeah, I think that just as long as kids sort of feel safe in their surrounds, and, you know, it's not a revolving door for mum or dad with, you know, a partner coming in and then leaving and things like that. So, you know, and parents have obviously got to be mindful of that, but which I think a lot are, but you know, they maybe sometimes don't realize what they do is what can actually impact the children.
Oh, the kids observe everything.
So they see it all.
They see it all, even though they don't know what it is.
Yeah.
It's like they know.
Something's up.
And then they're, you know, 25 when they'd be like, oh, that's what that was?
Definitely.
Oh, that's what was happening, you know?
Yes. Definitely.
So when we come back to, like, I'd say the court system, do you see people who abuse the court system and sort of maybe not with the current law firm you're with, but just throughout your career, where people kind of, as my friends call it, finesse the system and take it for a ride, knowing that it could be beneficial to them but not the other party, you know? Yeah,
I think that, I mean, you do certainly get instances of where you might have, say, when it comes to intervention orders, you may well have a child living in the care of one parent, and then one goes and then the non-primary carer goes and obtains an intervention order against the primary carer, which means that the child can't be with that primary carer, which ultimately means the child goes to the other parent.
And why would you do an intervention order? Would that
well,
just
if
be...
you, allegate any sort of, the definition of family violence is so broad.
Oh, right.
The definition of family violence is so broad. So a lot of people, the intervention orders are very common.
Yeah.
And, sometimes people play that as a little bit of a tactic to, to get the child or to get back at the, the other partner, the former partner, by sort of using, I suppose the two jurisdictions against each other. And, I think it's sort of well known that there's this stigma attached to the, system favouring mothers.
Yep.
Over
Absolutely.
fathers. In my experience, some days I would say yes, and then some days I would say no. So I don't necessarily have a strong view on that and whether that is still the case. Like I know that certainly, a lot of people think that is the case, but working in it, it's all circumstantial and depends what's happened in the past and depends what sort of is going to happen in the future and how you can provide for these children and what care you can give them.
Yeah, right.
As to whether or not there's favouring or not, I think it just ultimately comes down to who the primary carer was throughout the relationship, who's going to remain the primary carer. And, some people have done 50-50 throughout their relationship. They keep doing the 50-50 after separation. Sometimes dad's a stay-at-home dad. He remains being the stay-at-home dad after separation just because they've separated. And there's this stigma that women should be the primary carer. It doesn't mean that it just flips. Even because dad's been the primary carer whilst they're together, just because they've now separated doesn't give mum the automatic right to be the primary carer.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting because just because people bring in their emotions into this.
Oh, yeah.
And I've had some colleagues where they're going through it and they're like, the kids are mine. Like,
yeah.
Even though she's working majority of the time, it's just, again, like where you're commodifying a child and you're just, they're an item, they're a piece of, meat.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're mine now. And I don't care what you think. You can go back to Shelley, because I keep using Shelley. Sorry, whoever's called Shelley.
Hi to all the Shelleys out there.
I'm like, okay, Candace. Maybe we'll do Candace.
Yeah.
But, I just find it quite disturbing, maybe because people, especially in Australia, maybe pay attention to the US side of things more than Australia side of things. So they kind of get like a misconstrued sort of perception of how the law works here. And one thing I found that was quite different was prenups here.
Yeah.
Right? Because you'd think it just because, we always see celebrities. They always say, did you sign the prenup? And if the woman didn't want to sign the prenup, she doesn't end up being married because she doesn't get half these things, So do you find it different here?
Yeah. So firstly, we don't really call them prenups here in Australia.
Okay.
We call them, they're binding financial agreements.
Okay.
So a binding financial agreement, sometimes we call them prenups because everybody knows what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But the correct term actually is binding financial agreements, and they're a document that can be entered into before you get married, whilst you're still married, just to deal with your assets and to deal with ultimately the property pool in the event that you separate.
Right.
So sometimes, we generally find that there are a lot of people who are onto their second marriage and have already accumulated, quite a lot of, property. Maybe people a bit later, entering into a relationship later in life, are more likely to enter into a prenup because, they may well have been working for 30 years and they've met someone later on. They don't want to ultimately, when I say lose that property, if you don't have a binding financial agreement and you were to separate and you're either married or in a de facto relationship, all the property that you own, whether jointly or solely, I was talking about this earlier, gets put into the property pool, and then we start looking at contributions as to who gets what. So a prenup or a binding financial agreement ultimately just stipulates what happens in the event that you separate.
And how strong is it? Is it like...
Yeah, so both parties need to obtain independent legal advice. It's not a document that gets put through the courts or scrutinised by the courts. Both parties need to get independent legal advice. To have one overturned, there needs to be, there needs to be either a lack of disclosure. If you didn't say to someone, you know what, I've got a 3-bedroom apartment up in Queensland, they didn't disclose that to the other party. That's where agreement could be set aside by the court. I mean, if you're signing under duress, or if you don't sign this, I will not get married to you, things like that. And also the court also look at your circumstances. So you may well have entered into a prenup, binding financial agreement, when you're 18 and your parents had just gifted you a house or something like that, and your husband or your boyfriend's got nothing, but then you're together for 30 years, you have 3 children, you've accumulated this wealth during the time, and now you separate. That prenup that you signed when you're 18, it's no longer relevant.
Yeah.
So, you could argue that should be set aside, as, we've had such a change in circumstances since that was entered into.
I mean, whoever's signing prenups at 18 is like,
whoa.
Maybe they come from like some crazy rich family or something.
All right. Well, that's okay. Maybe we'll say 25 or something, or 30.
Yeah, exactly. So do you find that I don't know, would that be something that could, because I guess for people who might be watching this are about to get married or have waited a bit longer.
Yep.
So they've obviously accumulated a bit more. Do you find that is something you would recommend to someone, or do you just sort of do you feel like the court system here it'll be fine without it?
Yeah. I mean, I don't, unless one party's got everything and the other party perhaps have got nothing, and that person's not planning on going to work, or this person has worked, their whole lives or something like that. Yes, you would consider suggesting it, but I mean, probably just your typical mum and dad that have started probably not with much, and have built their wealth together. It wouldn't really cross your mind. And also, I think it's a bit of a personal choice. I mean, not a lot of people want to discuss that with their partners.
It's not sexy as
in
well.
the event that we separate, it's like, I don't really want to talk about this.
You don't believe me, you don't love me,
you don't love, and then that just causes a whole lot of stress. And that, a lot of the time we draft prenups and they never get signed. Because we draft them and they never get signed, because it's very difficult sometimes to have that conversation with your partner and saying, okay, well, if we separate, even though we've lived this great life together and we've shared our love and our finances, you're not getting jack shit. It's a hard conversation to have.
Yeah, but it's, I don't know. I find it to be, I just feel like it, with divorce, it either it changes people, or there's a side of them that comes out that might want to sort of take that from you. So I don't know, I guess it's not America, and I have to kind of get my head out of this, because it's something that you don't hear it about too much over here in Australia anyways. And I mean, who has, $30 million in their bank account that they're trying to protect?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Calm down, okay?
It does. I mean, people are very wealthy, and but sometimes when the more wealthy they are, the easier it is to spread it around.
Yeah, right.
Sometimes the less fighting, the more money, because people aren't so reliant on the dollar, each dollar, each cent, because there's a lot more to spread around. If you've got a property pool of 10 million, and oh, you're only going to get 10% of the property pool and that's $1 million. Oh, $1 million's all right. You can live off that. Whereas if it's 100,000 property pool and you only get 10 grand, that's not enough to buy a house. That's not enough for anything.
But then, with women who stay home, right, and want to do that. So a lot of the times these men, I guess, who would want money wouldn't mind a stay-home mom because they're like, well, she's balancing their dynamics out. And, you kind of, instead of getting a nanny, some people are like, no, I want my wife to raise the kids.
Yeah.
But then if they're, let's say, shit hits the fan, blah, 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 blah. Things don't work out, the kids, and I've found that a lot of women wait until the kids are older or something for them. But maybe that's something we can discuss later. But once shit hits the fan, it goes downhill. And now it comes to splitting things. Women feel, the stay-home mom feels like, well, I might not have contributed financially, but I've contributed my time, my energy. And people are like, being a mom is a full-time job, and maybe I should have worked, or I should have tried to accumulate something. But at that time, I was like, no, I'll be fine because I'm, in a safe, protected household and everything's taken care of. But do you feel like that's something where they should get half? And I'm talking about this because some male friends have asked me this, and I said yes, but they said hell no. So what do you think?
Yeah, so when it comes to when it comes to a property settlement, contributions get taken into account. So it's a 4-step process. The first thing we look at is what is actually in the property pool, which, like I said earlier, you've got your boat, you've got your caravan, you've got your house, etc. So what is there to divvy up? Then we look at contributions. So both contributions financially and non-financially, and also the role of homemaker. So, the court ultimately take the view that, if one party's out being the breadwinner and one party's out and one party's staying at home being the homemaker and the primary carer, equal weight should be given to those contributions, because if mum wasn't staying at home looking after the children, someone has to be at home. So it would be dad. Dad would be at home looking after the children and the mum would have to be at work. So that's So to answer your question as to whether it gets taken into account, absolutely it gets taken into account. I mean, and a lot of people have probably, done that. I mean, for example, my parents, my dad always worked and mum was was a stay-at-home mum, and she looked after us until, we all got to high school, and then she got a part-time job. So, and I think that that's quite common, that's probably quite common back, X amount of years ago, maybe more so now. People are having children a little bit later, so they've got their careers, but someone still has to be the primary carer.
Yeah, right.
A baby can't look after itself.
Yeah,
or
and childcare is so expensive too.
Yeah, that's right. But then even if the child goes into childcare, the expectation would be that both parents are working. So again, financial contributions in that respect would be similar.
Yeah.
But someone still then has to feed the once you pick the child up from childcare, there's still cooking, there's cleaning, there's homework, there's take kids to and from school. Like there's a whole breadth of what is involved when it comes to those childcare or homemaking duties.
Yeah, right.
Which even though a child might be at childcare from 9 till 3 or 6 till 6 or whatever, there's still those outside hours as to who's actually running the household. And that might be equal as well, and there you go. That's an equal split. Yeah,
right. So it's saying that, I read this article, I put it on the screen as we were talking about it, but it was saying that 70% of, I think it was either 60 or 70% of marriages are initiated by women. Divorces are initiated by women.
Yep.
Do you find that that's the case in your situation?
I think we're just a lot more perhaps organised in the relationship, because generally that weight of the housework, working, childcare, child minding, is a lot of the time women. I'm not to say that males don't do it, but majority of the time it is the woman taking on that role, whether it's working full time and then also coming home, cooking dinner, doing the school lunches, helping the kids with the homework, bathing them, things like that. So they've got control of the relationship. They know that, they know they know what they've got going on this weekend. They know when there's the dentist appointment. They know when there's a doctor's appointment. So I think they're sort of nearly maybe that one step ahead. So when it comes to separating, they've probably, they've already taken on, they've probably felt like they've had more of the load already. So it might be an easier decision for them to instigate it rather than, because the guy might be sitting back going, this is sweet. I get home every night. She cooks, she cleans, she takes the kids to school, picks them up. All I've got to do is, help them shower and put them to bed. Like, this is sweet.
Yeah. But do you also think there's, I don't know, there's like a unseen hand telling young girls that a Prince Charming, perfect, happy ending will happen to every single precious little girl, and you'll have your day and you'll get your dress and your knight in shining armor, and then realize that, marriages are some real shit. It's something that,
I think when you're young, like everyone wants that fairy tale.
Yeah.
Majority of the people want that fairy tale. I mean, everyone wants to live happily ever after, in whatever shape or form.
Yeah.
But you're right, though. The reality is that just because you get married doesn't mean that all the problems go away, or that, celebrating the day, or actually, having a piece of paper, having a marriage certificate means that, that things are going to get better, or that you're going to be together for the rest of your life. Because, and even when it comes to the Family Law Act, being married or being in a de facto relationship is the same weight. Doesn't matter in terms of entitlements.
Really?
Yeah. So it doesn't matter. I mean, I might be married for, 6 years, and you might have been with your partner for 6 years. Just because I'm married doesn't mean that I have to go through the process and you don't. You're entitled. You're eligible for the process.
And how long is it considered to have the same weight? Because obviously when you get married straight away, you're in the deep end.
So it's usually the period of cohabitation. Right. So once you commence living together.
From the beginning?
From the beginning.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So you might be living together for 10 years and then get married, and then you're only married for 1 year. That 10 years prior to you getting married still gets taken into consideration as to what you've contributed towards the relationship, because you're a couple, you're living together, presumably things start happening jointly.
Yeah, right.
So,
I never knew that.
Yeah. So, and I think not a lot of people do. They think, if you're not married, then, you're not entitled to a property settlement, or if you don't have children and you're not married, you're not entitled to anything, which is not actually the case.
Wow. And is that in Australia?
Yeah. Right. That's the Family Law Act. So the Family Law Act defines, so that the Family Law Act applies to whether you're married or in a de facto relationship. And a de facto relationship, the definition is, again, quite broad. Some people think, I have to be together for 12 months. It's once 12 months starts, then it's de facto. Some people think 6 months de facto, but it's actually a range of different things that can yes, obviously the length of time that you're together is something that gets taken into consideration as to whether you're in a de facto relationship, but other things such as, are you sharing finances? Would someone walking down the street think that you're a couple, or do your family and friends know that you're a couple? Things like that. So, that's, and we sometimes get clients that come to us and say, I shouldn't have to be, we shouldn't have to do any sort of property settlement. We're only roommates. Or she was my renter and, I owned the property and she was my renter, which, and then you got to delve into that more and say, okay, well, because, if you can't establish that you're in a de facto relationship, you don't fall within the Family Law Act, so there's no property settlement.
Right. So do people just say that to avoid the whole situation, even though they were in a...
like a sexual relationship or something. Yeah, or some people try. But you've got to, dive a little deeper into the
You're
relationship.
like, bullshit.
Yeah. Establish whether like, hang on a sec, I'm pretty sure that's not true. Like, why did you stick around for so long?
But then why would they come and see you if that means one party wanted something and the other party didn't want to
that's right.
comply.
Yep.
Right.
Yep, that's right. So to answer your question about marriage, I mean, I think that, I mean, again, I go back to how have you been brought up? I mean, your parents have divorced. You may not want to get married because your experience has been horrible, because you've seen your parents be unhappy, you've seen the fighting, you've seen this, you've seen that. My experience, like I said, all my close family are still married to their partners. So, is that something that I should strive for? Because, you obviously don't see what happens behind closed doors, but, they've made it work. You've seen the weddings, you've seen it was a perfect day. It was a great day. Everyone's happy, so that's something I want.
Yes. So
I think it certainly comes down to personal, how you've been brought up. And a lot of people, some people do just want a ring on their finger.
Yeah, and that's actually just pointing perfectly to where I was going, where it's like, so then why get married, right? For me, I sound like I'm a wet blanket, but I do want to get married, but you're talking about having a de facto the same weight as a marriage, right? So
yes.
I'm like, okay, well, that's not necessary to get married. You still have to go through all of those kind of legalities at the end of your relationship. But then also, so I'm guessing it's the wedding dresses and the official sort of ceremony. Are together.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's absolutely. I think that it's, a commitment to one another. Other than obviously having children is a big commitment to one another, but that's just another step in commitment that people may well see as being, part of their relationship. Again, I go back to, how you were brought up. That might be something that's very important to you because of how the people that you've been brought up have shaped you or something like that. Or, people might say, oh, what a waste of money. Like, of course we're together forever. We've got 3 children. We've got a mortgage. We've got, why do we need to spend an extra 50 grand on getting married when we know we're going to be together for the rest of our lives? So I think it's just a personal choice.
Right, because, today I've just learned that about the whole de facto thing, because now I'm like, everyone's like, oh, when you sign over, it's done. I'm like, no, it's already been done.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly
crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So unless, like I said, it's, but I mean, the law's changed in that respect. I mean, it wasn't always like that. If you weren't married, then like it would if you're just de facto, it wouldn't apply. Whereas now it does. So
wow.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that just the tradition of weddings, been going back for years and years and years and years. Yeah, so people want that, and I mean, not everyone wants that, but some people want. I don't. Yeah, I think it really just comes down to a personal choice in terms of will it affect your legal entitlement as to whether you're classified as married or de facto? No.
Yeah, right. So then now looking at family law, it's quite vast, right? So it's not just divorce or anything. And so what other sort of situations would you be dealing with outside of divorce and separation in your sort of field?
Yeah, sure. So we deal with family violence intervention orders.
Okay.
So a lot of, like I said, they're quite common now these days for a party. Once, a party separates and there's either a full intervention order, which is ultimately a no contact intervention order, which says you can't go within 5 meters.
Why has it become more common?
It just seems it just seems like majority of the cases now, if something happens at separation and there's a verbal altercation, a physical altercation, rather than sort of passing it off as maybe a one-off, either party might go get an intervention order against each other. And look, I think that, they're quite easy to get.
Right. Out of spite as well.
Out of spite. It's an online form now.
Oh.
It's an online
Snap.
form. You used to have to go to the police. You had to go to the courthouse, everything. Now it's an online form. And I feel like, perhaps the seriousness of them has perhaps been taken away a little bit as to people who seriously need protection because of someone who is committing family violence. And I know I'm certainly not alone in that view.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of things, when it comes to a intervention order, there's exceptions that say you can still communicate with one another if it's with regard to the children. There's a whole sort of vast range of what can be included as part of these intervention orders. So we deal with that a lot. They're sort of part and parcel of, a family law separation. Intervention orders sort of come with the territory a bit. Child support, it's quite a specialised sort of field, child support, because you've got the child support agency.
Right. And is that something that is taken seriously here? Of course it is, but it's, but you know what I mean? Like my only reference is movies, TV shows where, they can get sued if you don't pay child support, like how does it work here?
So you either go through the child support agency, which is a government body, which is through Centrelink. So you go through them, you get an assessment, and the assessment is based on your income. So both parties' income and the amount of nights that you have with the children.
Right.
Over a 14-day period. So you probably hear the stories about, people separate, then all of a sudden, they might be a sole trader and their income magically decreases 100 grand the next financial year because all they've got to do is submit their tax return to say how much they're earning. And, some people getting $17 a month for the care of 3 disabled children and things like that. Like there's stories from no end that you'll hear about. So you can go through that. You can go through that and just say, look, and child support just covers your basic essentials for children. So nothing extracurricular. So it doesn't cover if they want to go to a private school, doesn't cover, say, sporting activities, things like that. It just covers everyday living.
So is it a percentage of that income that comes out?
That's right.
So, right, because I've definitely seen people who've completely just decreased their annual income and be like, oh no, only 30 grand a year is all I earn. Yeah. Sorry, I'm poor over here. I have nothing.
Yeah.
Or then you see, someone has a baby with an athlete or something and you like $50,000 a month for child support.
Yeah.
That's your support, honey, and your trips to Miami
exactly.
every week.
Exactly. And look, I don't know. I think America might do it differently, but it is based on your income and the amount of time you spend with the children.
Yeah.
And again, child support is just for those everyday living expenses. It shouldn't amount to enough to be able to personal expenses paid trip, around Australia or, over to America or something. It shouldn't be that. It's basically the bare minimum for children.
Right. And do you submit a sort of summary of how much is needed on like a day-to-day basis or monthly basis?
Yeah, so you can jump online and have a look. There's a calculator online on the child support agency website where they don't take into, I could be right. I don't think they take into consideration what your actual expenses are. I mean, they look at the age of the children and things like that. But yeah, predominantly it is just how many nights you have the children. So what's the split? Is it a 50-50? Is it 9-10, 90-10 or whatever it is? And then they look at your income and then they calculate it. So we don't generally do that as family lawyers. We say if you've got some questions about child support, this is where you can go. Right,
which is kind of good. So you sort of just point them to that one specialised.
But then on the flip side, some people have their own private agreements because...
Right. Okay.
Some people say, all right, well, whilst the kids are in your care, you pay for them. Whilst they're in my care, I pay for them. And that's it. Or, if there's any over and above expenses, like I was saying, private schooling,
Dance classes.
You might agree to just split it 50-50. So you can also have a private agreement, which child support have nothing to do with. You just tell child support, we've got a private agreement, so you don't have to chase us up or anything like that.
Right. And do they chase you up?
People generally apply for like a single parent
right.
payment once they separate. So it sort of flags with Centrelink.
Right. Okay.
That you're perhaps now separated, and they're going to ask the question, what benefits other than perhaps your Centrelink do you receive?
Yeah.
And you would have to say, perhaps I'm getting $200 cash from my ex a week, or deposited into my bank account, or you can see through the bank account that I'm getting X amount because we've got a child support assessment through you guys or something like that. So we can assist with the drafting of what's called a binding child support agreement.
Okay.
We can, lawyers draft those.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, to cater for those expenses that child support don't allow for.
Yeah.
If people can't ultimately work it out and just agree amongst themselves.
Yeah, right. And so are there any, it just feels like the Australian court system is actually pretty all right. Like compared to, I guess what I thought of it, maybe because I haven't been a part of this system. But it doesn't seem, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't seem something where you got to make sure before you go into a de facto relationship or a marriage, make sure you protect yourself, right? Like maybe it's protect yourself from the version of your spouse that might come out later. Yeah. But the actual court system, you're saying, well, we're going to take into consideration the fact that you've been staying at home and you've contributed to the kids.
Yes.
Right. And then also, we'll take into account the properties and everything. Also debt, right?
Yeah. Also debt.
So if you owed a grant at $100K, you both have to pay the 50, I guess
it's 50-50. If it's 50-50, yeah. Or one party takes the full debt and then pays the other out.
What if it's gambling debt?
That's different. No. So if it's a wastage argument, so you're gambling on the horses or you're going to the pokies or you're just full on wasting money, you'd bring a wastage argument to say, look, that money should be included in the property pool because you've wasted it. You've instead of there being 150 grand in our bank account, we've only got $1 because you've spent it all. You've wasted it all. You've gambled it all. So that essentially gets added back into the property pool available for distribution. So, yes, contributions are taken into account. Something else that also gets taken into account when it comes to a property settlement are what the court call future needs. So future needs are your age, your health, your So I was just talking about future needs and how that is something gets taken into account. Like I was saying, the age, health, income, who's got the care of the children. So let's just say, I'll just use an example. Let's just say mum and dad are together for 15 years. Mum's a stay-at-home mum, dad's out being the breadwinner. On contributions, a court's going to say, look, over the course of 15 years, you both, unless there's been some big inheritance or something like that, 15, 20 years of a relationship, the court are going to say, oh, look, contributions fairly equal. Then they say, right, we're at a 50-50. Now we've got this third step, which is future needs. So what's the age, what's the health, what's the ability to keep earning, who's got the care of the children? I mean, mum might be still a stay-at-home mum and has got the care of 3 children. So the court are going to adjust her entitlement based on the fact that she's got the care of the children. So she needs more of the property pool, so more money to be able to assist her with those, because she's got greater future needs. Because she might have been out of the workforce for the last 20 years, whereas the husband's been working, getting promotions. He's got the ability, even if he's got the kids 50-50, perhaps he's got the ability to, or even, maybe not even 50-50, but, he can keep perhaps progressing his career. Whereas stay-at-home mum and still perhaps the primary care of the children, it's difficult for them to get into the workforce and to get, to build up an income and build up their base and things like that. So the court allow for that in a property adjustment.
And then what if because now with modern women now, a lot of them are working, right? So is that also taken into consideration with
so your income and your income earning capacity.
Yeah.
So you might, let's just say I'll use another example. You were a stay-at-home mum. Now the kids are older and they're all at school, and mum's still staying at home, not doing anything and not out working. Her ability to earn income's there. She's just not
wanting to.
She's not wanting to. So why would the court give her any adjustment in her favour because she's not getting off her butt and going to work?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, right.
So the adjustment comes, and if someone, if you've got a disabled child, or, someone might be 60 and retire and the other party's 40 and has been a stay-at-home mother and hasn't got any superannuation, hasn't got any skills or anything like that, whereas a 6-year-old can retire and live off their $300,000 super, an adjustment needs to be made in, say, the wife's favour in that instance, because her future needs are greater.
Right. So what would happen in that case then?
So instead of it being, say, a 50-50, it might be 55% to her or 60% to her.
But she can work.
Yeah, this is if there's like a large disparity in income.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So you've got to be sort of chalk and cheese. So if one can do one thing and the other can't, and you've got greater future needs than the other party, then the court take that into consideration. But sometimes, excuse me, people separate. Kids are a bit older, both of them can work.
Yeah.
There's no adjustment. Sorry.
No, it's all right. Right. But then I don't know. I see that a bit unfair to if a guy has his whole super.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have much. I mean, he has like 20 years. I don't want to say he doesn't have much longer left, but in terms of in the workforce, it's pretty much done. I think maybe another 5 years, maybe 10 max. But then she is in her 40s. She can still definitely start contributing to not only herself, but if they had kids or anything. But why is it that I would think that looking at that potential earnings or income would actually decrease it, because he won't have much of a future of creating money compared to her, right?
Yeah, and look, he may well not have any adjustment made in his favour because of future needs, but she may well get a small amount, whether it be she gets a little bit of his super because she's been the stay-at-home mum for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
She gets a little bit of his super or an adjustment in her favour.
Yeah.
And he may well not get, like may not necessarily going to be sort of penalised.
Yeah.
He just doesn't get any adjustment.
Yeah.
However, she may well get an adjustment because she's got no super, she's 40, she's got no skills.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So she's not going to be able to accrue, she's not going to be able to have 300,000 in super by the time she's 60.
Right. Okay.
Like he's been able to. So it's a case-by-case scenario, but yeah, generally and again, it takes, we look at the length of the relationship as well.
Yeah.
The longer you're together, the closer to a 50-50 you're going to be.
Yeah, right. Yeah, true. Because it's usually a balance.
Yeah, that's right.
Have you had any, this is random, just came in my head, have you had any sort of polyamorous situations come where it's one spouse, two wives, three? No, okay.
Sometimes, I remember this one, and there was the de facto wife, the man was married, our client was married, and the wife, they separated because he was having an affair, but he was having an affair for 8 years or something like that. So the mistress ultimately said, I'm entitled to something because I'm your de facto. So that was a case of, oh God, actually.
Yeah, right.
So who owns what in this property pool? We need to sort of do two property settlements in a way, because one was with him and the wife, and one was with him and the mistress.
Yeah. And he kind of ends up missing out more because now he has to.
Yeah, but it's sort
distribute
of
it.
like what comes first? As the wife's property settlement comes
Yeah,
first? As
right.
Because
now
the
they're
mistress,
the same.
they're the same. They're the same.
That's crazy. I'm sorry. I can't get over the fact that it's the same. I think
It's not the entitlement may not necessarily be the same as to what that, what they end up with.
Yeah.
I mean, the wife's been married to him for 30 years. They'll end up with a 50-50. This mistress has been around for 8 years or less and has done nothing and lived on and smooched off him.
Yeah.
She might get nothing, or she might get 10% or something like that. So it doesn't mean that the entitlement that they end up with is the same. However, they're both able to access
his funds.
Yeah. They're both entitled to a property settlement.
Yeah, right. But then I think the one thing that's shocked me is just knowing that a de facto and a marriage are seen very similarly. And maybe not in that situation where there was two parties, but like just, I mean, either a lot of girls are going to be moving in with their boyfriends very, very soon at this point, or, yeah, but that's really interesting. I think that's something I'm definitely going to take into account.
Yeah.
So then where do you see the future of family law and like where we're going? Do you feel like it's going to be, do you feel like it needs to be more streamlined, or do you think because it's a case by case basis, it can never really be, because you talked about the form, the intervention order, right? Where it's become a lot more accessible, but now the seriousness behind it is kind of, it's just not,
Yeah. And look, and there has been an increase in family violence. Look, I guess it's a bit like all legislation. Can it be reviewed? I know that we've just, like I said, we've just had the merger of the two family courts, which has meant that we've got this new set of legislation, which ultimately mirrors, mirrors the previous act. However, in terms of how to change it, I think what this pandemic's taught us is that we can adapt to anything, and thinking that we were all going to go online and, that was such a crazy thought. You've got these practitioners who are in their, 80s, and, you'd be surprised how much everyone can use Zoom or Microsoft Teams, and how actually efficient it has been. Whether that's going to be the way of the world sort of moving forward, perhaps.
Yeah.
Again, like I said, I in terms of efficiency, yes, but I do feel like as a junior practitioner, you miss out on seeing real life, what happens, seeing a barrister, seeing a lawyer.
So do you think it will come back to that, or do you think?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I know that in Ballarat, it's not all of it. I think it's sort of half and half becoming face-to-face next year, which has sort of been ultimately an initiative driven by the lawyers of Ballarat to try and get the court back face-to-face, for a majority of reasons.
Yeah.
But, also just to see your colleagues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's just looking at it holistically. It's just good for everyone to see each other, and also interacting on a screen. I mean, don't get me wrong, as you said, it's become more like efficient when it comes to getting things done. But then at the same time, I'm sure the efficiency will still be there when you see each other. You might just be like, hey, how are you? Maybe have a bit of a personal conversation before you actually get to it. But it's, in a way, it ends up being more fruitful and better for your mental health anyways.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, look, if we can go, the preference is to, well, for me would be, because, I'm still relatively young. There's so much you can learn from other practitioners, particularly seeing the court process and seeing, how, sometimes you even think, oh God, that sounds good. I'm going to say something like that next time, you know, things like that. Whereas when you're on the screen, you're just up for your matter for 10 minutes or half an hour or whatever, and then you log off.
Yeah.
You don't listen to other people. You don't hear other people's cases or anything like that. And you might think, sometimes your case, for example, back before COVID, I remember a matter I had which the facts of the matter were so similar. My matter was very similar to the matter before me.
Right.
And the judge just ripped through the lawyer acting for the husband, and I was, in my matter, acting for the husband. And I thought, oh God, like I just knew.
Oh shit.
Oh shit. Like this is just, because it was a similar sort of set of facts in terms of relationship length and
argument and everything.
Everything like that. And I remember him just ripping through this lawyer, and I'm thinking, shit, I'm next. And I did. Like I got an absolute caning because you know, but you wouldn't, not that it would change anything, but at least it was like, all right, I'm sort of mentally prepared for this.
Yeah.
I know what's coming, and, you sort of can gauge you can gauge sort of how perhaps the judge is that day, how they're feeling.
Yeah.
If they've had enough sleep, everything like that. Or, have they had a couple of matters this morning that have really ticked them off?
Yeah.
That doesn't matter what you do or say, they're still just going to come down on you like a ton of bricks because of something that happened earlier in the day.
Right.
You might be able to see that and go, all right, well, at least I'm prepared for that, or I can perhaps change my approach.
Right. And do you try and establish relationships with the judges?
Yeah.
Just so, again, stop thinking about movies and TV shows, but that's all I know. But yeah, is that something that's important to you? And would it be because to rule in your favor, or would it be just something just because your colleagues?
I think just in networking.
Yeah.
I think, particularly in Ballarat, like we have this collaborative, lawyering, so you can pick up the phone and talk to a colleague, rather than the emails, formalities being back and forth and people getting angry with each other or misreading tone, and, because you're bumping into them all the time. So, I think in terms of just having that, community, even though you're representing different sides, still having that, sort of community and collaboration that, or you might feel a little more at ease talking to the judge because, you know them by their first name or something like that.
Right.
Judges are independent, impartial. Certainly your relationship with them shouldn't affect your matter, or
because they're judges.
They're judges. That's right. That's right. They don't care who they're hearing it from.
Yeah.
One person might be a better lawyer or something like that, but in terms of, the personal relationship, it won't affect, the case and what's decided. It might just make you feel maybe a little more at ease when you're before that judge because, you've seen them down the street buying coffee or something like that, and you've said hello to them.
Right. And how do you prepare yourself before going to court? Like, how does that process look like? Because I feel like it has to be really well thought out, making sure, there's no sort of stumbling across upon your words, and like making sure you're confident in what your argument is and everything like that. Like, how does that process go?
Yeah, I suppose the more you do it, the more you get sort of used to it. But yeah, obviously preparing is a huge thing. Like knowing the law.
And how much of the law do you have to know? Because it's,
Yeah, I suppose it's just whatever's relevant sort of to your point. I mean,
right.
a judge isn't going to say, all right, Miss McCurdy, what is section 150 of the Corporations Act say? And you're trying to talk about a family law matter.
Wrong.
Yeah. doesn't happen like that.
Yeah.
But, if you're arguing a point and you're trying to get a point across but you don't sort of know what the section of the act means that you're trying to convince the judge to understand or to, agree with you, then, that's sort of a bit of...
Yeah, right.
That doesn't really get you far. But we've all been there. I mean, I've had a judge ask me what a section of the Family Law Act was before, and I was like, where's my family law book when I need it?
Yeah, right, yeah.
But yeah, so obviously like preparation is key. I mean, you don't sort of see anyone standing up there with a piece of paper reading through their submissions or anything like that.
Okay.
Perhaps maybe if you're a junior lawyer or something like that, you might be, which everyone's human. They take into account if this was your first court appearance or something like that. So yeah, so it's certainly preparation and, like your conduct in the court and, how you're sitting at the bar table and, just how you speak, how you present, things like that. So, you could be the most confident person in the world, but if you don't, if you if you're sitting there with your feet up on the bar table or something like that, and like it's not a good look.
Yeah. Do you have any cases that have made you nervous to present or to go up in court for?
Yeah, I think you usually got a pretty good idea as to where sometimes a matter is going to end up.
Oh, okay.
You've either gotten, say, a family report, and the family report's recommended that the children should live with mum and spend alternate weekends with dad, but you act for dad and dad's going, I don't care what that report says, I want 50-50. And you're saying, well, my advice is not to go 50-50 because you're going to get you're going to get your ass handed to you. And they say, nope, that's what I want you to do. And you think, all right, well, that's completely against my advice, but I am your representative, so we'll try and... So sometimes when you get up, you just think, oh, this is just going to be a waste of time.
Right,
Like you'll put it, and you say that to your client, I'm going to put it to the court. The court are going to say no, but, at least you sort of feel like you're doing your job perhaps. So, yeah, but, sometimes the judge might wake up having a bad day and you're just in there, line of fire, and... Trust me, it's not fun when you are.
Yeah, right.
It's not fun when you are. But I get probably nearly nervous every time I get up before a judge. I mean, I think that's just, human nature. But
yeah, right.
Obviously, the more you do it, the more you feel comfortable. But, there have been cases where, particularly when I used to do a bit of criminal law,
right,
I'd get up and I just think, God, you are why am I even... like trying to make out that you're a good person because you're actually a piece of shit.
Right. So I thought the lawyer kind of has to believe that they're a good person to defend them, or is that sort of, not
really. No. Okay. No. I mean, obviously you can't lie to the court or anything like that. But, and I mean, a lot of people think, oh, I don't know how you could live with this. I mean, I've heard this so many times. People say, look, I don't know how you could live with, what if your client says they're guilty and how can you get up and say that they're not guilty? It doesn't happen like that.
Right.
If your client has said, I did it, you can't get up and mislead the court and say, my client didn't do it. Because our duty as lawyers, our first duty is to the court. Yeah. It's not to our client.
Yeah,
our first duty is to the court. So we can't mislead the court by saying, oh, he told me 5 minutes ago that he actually, did it. And then I get up and say, no, Your Honour, he didn't.
And so what kind of crime situations? I mean, I know we're kind of going off a tangent, but this is so interesting. What kind of crime, were you dealing with?
Say, I mean, I use this example once. I had a client that he hooked his car. He had a chain. He chained an ATM machine to the back of his car and he ripped it out of the wall. And he said, and he got done on CCTV footage, like it was all there.
Yeah.
And he was swearing till he was blue in the face, saying, I did not do it. I'm not pleading guilty. And I'm going, there's CCTV camera that shows your face driving, pulling out this ATM from the wall. Well, I don't care. I want you to get up and say that I'm pleading not guilty. I can't do that.
Yeah,
I can't do that.
So even though they say they're not guilty, but then the evidence shows that they are.
Yeah, you're clearly guilty.
Right,
yeah.
Right.
Because then, again, that's not, unless he can pull out some evidence to the contrary to say that that's... Yeah, exactly. to say something like that, you can't mislead the court.
Yeah.
Because, or you just say to your client, I'm not acting for you because that's not... Sorry, you get someone else to represent you.
Right.
Because I'm not getting up and saying that you didn't do it when it is pretty much 100%.
So then what will be the best case scenario in that situation? Would you just try and reduce their sentence? Or
yeah, so if you pled guilty, then you would just argue mitigating factors. So whether it be, some mental health issues, whether it be, or perhaps it was their first time offence, wrong place, wrong time.
Yeah.
Perhaps they were caught up in the wrong crowd. I mean, and that's why you have to take detailed history. I mean, it's not just you rock up at court and you defend your client on that day. I mean, there's a lot of preparation that comes into it, getting, character references, getting, getting referrals if they've been on, if they've had a history of drug and alcohol use, getting perhaps, referral letters or, letters from the doctor saying they're clean and they're well regarded in the community, things like that. So there's a lot of, even though your client might be pleading guilty, you can still try and lesser their sentence if they're genuinely doing good things to try and sort of redeem themselves. Right. Sometimes you've got clients that are like, yep, I did it. No, I'm not changing. You're like, well, you may as well represent yourself. Don't pay a lawyer.
Have you seen those people represent themselves in court? And is it as tragic as it looks online?
Yeah, I mean, it's not great. Sometimes you get frustrated with sort of how disrespectful I think sometimes people can be to the magistrates and the judges and calling them mate and calling them your mind's blown sometimes. You're sitting there sort of cringing going, just don't say that.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, again, they haven't been, they haven't been given legal advice, so they don't know any different.
They have no idea. Yeah. And then what made you kind of transition out of crim court?
Yeah, I think I was only doing it as part of sort of being a generalist lawyer, and not a lot of firms, not a lot of firms who are generalist firms do crime. You tend to either just be like a criminal lawyer or you're something else. Yeah. Like you're not sort of both.
Yeah.
You're not a property lawyer and a criminal lawyer.
Yeah, right.
So I think that's just sort of, the firm that, when I moved to Ballarat, the firm that I worked for didn't offer criminal law. Yeah. So as an area of law.
Yeah.
So I just stopped doing it.
Yeah, right. Because it is true. Because when you hear about people who do criminal law, they're like, why would you? Why? Like, why would you defend this man? These are terrible things. So why are lawyers needed for people who are clearly guilty? Is it just?
I think it's just to try and to mitigate what, that their circumstances were surrounding the offence, and, because it's not just, in terms of, I mean, you may have broken the law and be pleading guilty to, I don't know, stealing a car or assaulting someone or something like that. It's not to say that you won't, you're not perhaps charged and convicted, but your sentence may be lessened based on those mitigating factors that I mentioned before, things like, mental health.
It's not black and white.
It's not black and white. No, that's right. I mean, in terms of whether you did it or not is generally pretty clear.
Black and white, yeah.
Yep. Generally pretty clear because, unless you've got some evidence to the contrary to say that, like you were saying, that's my twin or something like that, it's pretty clear that they're the ones that have done it.
Okay.
And then, you ultimately your lawyer's the one that then tries and argues for a lesser of a sentence based on perhaps all these good personality traits. I mean, accidents happen. I mean, sometimes you get, a kid that's just had a bad day and they go and drink with their mates at the pub and then they get into a car accident and they, or blow .0 something there's always, and that's, I suppose, our role. It's not to make excuses for them, but it's to help understand sort of, I guess, why this behaviour happened. It may just be a once-off. It may be, something that they might be a repeat offender. We don't know. Yeah,
right. No, it's good to know. I mean, I guess when you think someone's guilty, you just think, no, take them away and we don't need you in society. But then there are other factors that could come into why. And also, if I was caught into a crime, there'll be obviously it will be out of character. So it'll be good for someone to sort of look at the whole story and see why it happened.
Yeah,
even though it did happen, you're like, mate, you're going to jail, and people
make mistakes. That's just, that happens. But again, it's not an excuse for people's behaviour. It's just more of an understanding, I guess, as to, but mind you, I've only dealt with quite sort of low level crime. I haven't dealt with murder or anything like that. So, generally it is just a sort of, have they had any priors and, do they have a job? Are they involved in the community? Things like that.
And do you see yourself doing family law for a long time?
Yeah,
Is that something you enjoy?
I do. Yeah, I do really enjoy it. I just, like I said, I think I like the sort of people,
Yeah.
you know, the personal element to it with, you know, talking to people, not just sitting there sort of drafting contracts or,
Yeah.
you know, a renewal lease or something like that. I, you know, quite enjoy that.
Yeah.
Just that, you know, I'm a bit of a people person. You know, I like to talk. You probably noticed.
Oh, I'm loving it. I am loving it. You know. No, it's been great.
Yeah, so no, that I certainly do see it. And I think, you know, you'll find probably most family lawyers are quite sort of passionate about their role. You know, and you know, particularly, you know, because there's so many sort of elements to it and what can be, and you know, it's real life, you know, and people are at their most vulnerable. So
yeah, that's true. That's true. I think I mean, I've learned a lot today. I think this is definitely an episode I'm very excited to put out. And also just having your insight into multiple sides of the law. Like, obviously, okay, that sounded really wrong. It sounded like you're on the bad side of it. But
sometimes it feels like you are.
But no, it's been an absolute pleasure, like, having you here.
Thank you for having me back.
You're always welcome to come back, talk about more interesting stories. I think people can very much relate to what we spoke about today, especially because looking at the amount of separations and divorce homes there are, or even people who might be going through a separation or in a relationship, just sort of looking at how this sort of looks like. Not saying that everything will end up in court, but it's just good to at least have some kind of idea as to, oh, okay, I'm living with someone. These are the things that could be considered if things went, you know,
pear-shaped. Yeah.
But yeah, so where can people find you? Do you want to put your social media, or do you just want to put your, you know, I know there's Haven Legal Co. as well.
Yeah, so Haven Legal Co. I mean, we've got a Facebook page and we've also got a website.
And I'll put it up on
the put it up on the link and everything. You know, I won't say my email or phone number or anything like that. Just Google it and you'll be able to find us. But
Google me, honey.
We're fairly active sort of on the Facebook and like you were mentioning before, the website. So you should be able to get all of our details from there. I mean, we also offer, you know, other than family law, we also offer conveyancing and wills and estates and I think, maybe just a little bit of property law as well. So, I mean, we can sort of, do it all. Yeah. Except for crime.
Except for crime. Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Ashlyn. And it's a wrap.
Thank you very much for having me.